Hi, this is Jordan Kanapke, and this will be my presentation on my country, Venezuela. This will just give a little bit of insight into the history, the social, political, and economic climate of the country, as well as just talking about the people there, how business is done, and how it's all operated in Latin America in general. So, just to give a little bit of a background, Venezuela sits in the northernmost portion of South America with the Caribbean Sea forming its northern border. In 1449, Christopher Columbus and Alonso de Ojeda landed upon the northern coast of what is now today Venezuela. So originally it was established in 1821, but they gained their own independence as their own country in 1830. Today they're known for their large quantities of oil, which has led to its global importance. And it has cultural roots of Caribbean, Andean, Amazonian, Latin American, among many other indigenous cultures. And like currently, there's a huge political controversy as their recent leaders have been acting more as dictators than as true democratic rulers. Along with this, there's an economic crisis as this country has experienced large amounts of hyperinflation. Demographically, there's four groups that make up the country. Um, so the mestizos, or pardos, depending on what you want to call them, is a mixed European and native ancestry, comprising 67% of the population. You have a white race, which is European descent, mainly Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese, which is 21% of the population. Black, which is African and Caribbean descent, is about 10%, and then you have a native population about 2%. And these groups tend to be regionally localized. So the cities are mainly inhabited by the whites and mestizos. The natives occupy the remote areas of the country, and then the black population lives along the Caribbean coastline. A big part of their demographic population is also from immigrants. So they about one fourth of their population are immigrants from Ecuador, Colombia, and Chile. And while I'm on the topic of immigration, I should note that there's a large amount of people who are trying to get out of the country and emigrate out as a result of the hyperinflation. People feel like they can get a better opportunity elsewhere versus in the situation they're in currently. An interesting dynamic with this country as a result of its colonial past. Despite this large diversity, um, in terms of religion, over 90% of the population is Catholic. So it's not secular at all, and they all seem to have around the same beliefs in regards to religion. So politically, I mentioned how the rulers have been kind of performing as dictators. So I'm going to first mention how the political system is supposed to function. So it's a federal republic, much like the United States, with five branches of government consisting of executive, legislative, judiciary, electoral, and a citizen branch. The executive branch is obviously the president, and they're in the laws. The president is supposed to serve a 6 year term after being elected by popular vote. However, this isn't the case as Hugo Chavez handpicked Nicolas Maduro, and they've been serving for essentially the past 3 decades. The legislative branch is has over 165 seats, where people are elected a popular vote. The judicial branch has members who serve 12-year terms. Same idea. They're picked by popular vote, and the whole idea is that it's supposed to be a system of checks and balances, but it's been kind of corrupted. Uh, Mainly by after the 50s, it's been kind of corrupted by the rulers because they've been performing more as dictators and as a political system is supposed to work. And as a result, there's been political turmoil, and with the hyperinflation that's ensued, people feel like they uh, they don't have representation, and these leaders who are supposed to be like representing them aren't really doing anything to help them out. So basically, to sum it up, the presidents have really just been abusing their power in Venezuela. Just to give an idea of the people and the culture that exists in Venezuela and like the implications of it on the business world, I felt like it was important to look at Hofstede's dimensions of culture. So the scores are on my screen with a power distance of 81, uncertainty avoidance of 76, individualism of 12, and masculinity of 73. So you can sense that there's an inequality between the powerful positions, and with that in their culture, there's an idea of machismo. So the men actually, like by a landslide, they occupy the most important political, economic, social, and religious positions in Venezuela. Another interesting dynamic of Venezuelan culture is that hierarchy is like respected. So people, if there's a conflict at work, they won't directly talk about the conflict like they would in the United States. Also, unlike the United States, Venezuela is not individualistic. They are a very collectivist culture, which means that they are more likely to cooperate with their colleagues than to compete with them, and they're going to hire those who they are familiar with. And people in the workforce choose what to do is good for the group, and rarely do they ever do anything good for the individual. It's a really interesting dynamic when comparing to the familiarity of what we're so used to in the United States. So I've talked about the economy and how they're in this situation of hyperinflation. So I just wanted to show, like, in 1950, if you look at the chart on the left, look at the GDP per capita. They were the number four country in the world in GDP per capita. In 2018, they were 122nd. Another interesting graph, if you look at the one on the right, it shows how the GDP per capita over the years progressed in respect to other Latin American countries, and it actually projects what it's going to be in the future. And it just goes to show how big of a crisis Venezuela is in terms of their economic situation. They were an extremely powerful country just because of the vast amount of resources they had. And they went through this period of hyperinflation, and it essentially has just been going downhill ever since. Obviously, they're trying to fix it, but hyperinflation is something that's pretty hard to combat. So, along with this is their economy and business practices. They're the 79th freest economy in the world, and this may this may kind of show why um, they're struggling so much with their economy. So, like their economy was once a modern economy, but it collapsed into almost a sense of a 21st century feudalism. The monetization of large public deficits, coupled with mismanagement of the state dominant oil industry, has led to this hyperinflation and shortages of foreign currency, basic goods, and overall industrial inputs. There's just a long process for businesses in general to even get started. With so most Latin American countries average about 9 procedures to get a business started. Venezuela has 17 procedures uh, in order to complete to start a business, and on average, it takes around 144 days just to start a business, which obviously has implications. And this isn't even including things such as construction permits, electricity, property registrations, credit regulations, and difficulties overall in obtaining credit, and obviously the vast amount of cultural differences that exist from the demographics in Venezuela. While I'm on the topic of business, I would like to talk about like their business practices. Like many Latin American countries, they practice more of an indirect form of communication, and it's a result of their leadership and style and decision making. Especially like as I talked about in situations with negative information, they tend to practice this. And as previously mentioned, managerial positions, like they tend to make uh, the final say in what is done because there's just such a respect for hierarchy in business. And like, along with this, it's kind of bad, but there's like this idea that in the social and political world that certain people should be in power. So, and it dates back to their colonial period that whites and the mestizos have all the power, but especially the white, and they hold the most control in those important positions in the government and economics and other positions. So I may have gone a little bit long. I just want to say thank you. Overall, Venezuela is extremely culturally diverse. They're in a situation filled with controversy and turmoil, and they're just dealing with a bunch of struggles. Obviously, dating back to their hyperinflation and their political situation. They have a high uncertainty avoidance. They have a high power distance, and overall, they're just a really collectivist culture, much like many other Latin American countries. I just feel like it's a really interesting country when comparing it to the United States because it's so different with everything that's going on. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about my country. I enjoyed learning about it and I enjoyed talking about it to you guys. And here are my references. I kind of had a hard time putting them into my PowerPoint. It's in APA format. It's just, I don't know what happened when I put it in here. So, yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.